Eid is a special time for Muslims. It's a time for joy and celebration. We celebrate Eid twice a year. It's a time to be thankful for Allah's blessings. We celebrate with our families and communities. Eid is a time for new clothes and delicious food. We exchange gifts and greetings with loved ones. Eid reminds us to be kind and generous. Muslims celebrate two Eids, Eid-ul-Fitr and Eid-ul-Adha. Eid-ul-Fitr marks the end of Ramadan. Ramadan is the holy month of fasting. Eid-ul-Adha comes later in the Islamic year. It honors Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son. Both Eids are special and have important meanings. Eid-ul-Fitr is a happy celebration after Ramadan. Muslims wake up early and pray a special Eid prayer. We wear new clothes and eat delicious food. We visit family and friends and exchange gifts. Children receive gifts and money called Eid. It's a time to be thankful for Allah's blessings. Eid-ul-Adha remembers Prophet Ibrahim's sacrifice. He was willing to sacrifice his son for Allah. Allah gave him a ram to sacrifice instead. Muslims sacrifice an animal on Eid-ul-Adha. They share the meat with the poor and needy. This reminds us to be generous and help others. Volume 2, Book 15, number 69, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. Umar bought a silk cloak from the market, took it to Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, take it and adorn yourself with it during the Eid and when the delegations visit you." Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, replied, "This dress is for those who have no share in the hereafter." After a long period, Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, sent to Umar a cloak of silk brocade. Umar came to Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, with the cloak and said, "O Allah's apostle, you said that this dress was for those who had no share in the hereafter, yet you have sent me this cloak." Allah's apostle said to him, "Sell it and fulfill your needs by it." Volume 2, Book 15, number 70, narrated by Aisha. Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, came to my house while two girls were singing beside me the songs of Bu'ath, a story about the war between the two tribes of the Ansar, the Khazraj and the Aus before Islam. The Prophet, p.b.u.h, lay down and turned his face to the other side. Then Abu Bakr came and spoke to me harshly saying, "Musical instruments of Satan near the Prophet, p.b.u.h. Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, turned his face towards him and said, "Leave them." When Abu Bakr became inattentive, I signaled to those girls to go out and they left. It was the day of Eid, and the black people were playing with shields and spears, so either I requested the Prophet, p.b.u.h, or he asked me whether I would like to see the display. I replied in the affirmative. Then the Prophet, p.b.u.h, made me stand behind him and my cheek was touching his cheek and he was saying, "Carry on, O Bani Arfida," till I got tired. The Prophet, p.b.u.h, asked me, "Are you satisfied? Is that sufficient for you?" I replied in the affirmative and he told me to leave. Volume 2, Book 15, number 71, narrated by Al-Bara. I heard the Prophet, p.b.u.h, delivering a khutbah saying, "The first thing to be done on this day, first day of Eid-ul-Adha, is to pray. And after returning from the prayer we slaughter our sacrifices in the name of Allah, and whoever does so he acted according to our sunnah, traditions." Volume 2, Book 15, number 72, narrated by Aisha. Abu Bakr came to my house while two small Ansari girls were singing beside me the stories of the Ansar concerning the day of Bu'ath, and they were not singers. Abu Bakr said protestingly, "Musical instruments of Satan in the house of Allah's apostle." It happened on the Eid day and Allah's apostle said, "O Abu Bakr, there is an Eid for every nation and this is our Eid." Volume 2, Book 15, number 73, narrated by Anas bin Malik. Allah's apostle never proceeded for the prayer on the day of Eid-ul-Fitr unless he had eaten some dates. Anas also narrated, the Prophet used to eat odd number of dates. Volume 2, Book 15, number 74, narrated by Anas. The Prophet said, "Whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before the Eid prayer should slaughter again." A man stood up and said, "This is the day on which one has desire for meat," and he mentioned something about his neighbors. It seemed that the Prophet believed him. Then the same man added, "I have a young she-goat which is dearer to me than the meat of 2 sheep. The Prophet permitted him to slaughter it as a sacrifice. I do not know whether that permission was valid only for him or for others as well. Volume 2, Book 15, number 75, narrated by Al-Bara bin Azib. The Prophet delivered the khutbah after offering the prayer on the day of Nar and said, "Whoever offers the prayer like us and slaughters like us, then his nusuk, sacrifice, will be accepted by Allah, and whoever slaughters his sacrifice before the Eid prayer, then he has not done the sacrifice." Abi Burda bin Niyar, the uncle of Al-Bara, said, "O Allah's apostle, I have slaughtered my sheep before the Eid prayer, and I thought today is a day of eating and drinking, not alcoholic drinks, and I liked that my sheep should be the first to be slaughtered in my house, so slaughtered my sheep and took my food before coming for the prayer." The Prophet said, "The sheep which you have slaughtered is just mutton, not a nusuk." He, Abu Burda, said, "O Allah's apostle, I have a young she-goat which is dearer to me than 2 sheep. Will that be sufficient as a nusuk on my behalf?" The Prophet, p.b.u.h, said, "Yes, it will be sufficient for you, but it will not be sufficient, as a nusuk, for anyone else after you." Volume 2, Book 15, number 76, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. The Prophet used to proceed to the Musalla on the days of Eid-ul-Fitr and Eid-ul-Adha. The first thing to begin with was the prayer, and after that he would stand in front of the people and the people would keep sitting in their rows. Then he would preach to them, advise them and give them orders, that is, khutbah. And after that, if he wished to send an army for an expedition, he would do so, or if he wanted to give an order, he would do so, and then depart. The people followed this tradition till I went out with Marwan, the governor of Medina, for the prayer of Eid-ul-Adha or Eid-ul-Fitr. When we reached the Musalla, there was a pulpit made by Kathir bin As-Salt. Marwan wanted to get up on that pulpit before the prayer. I got hold of his clothes, but he pulled them and ascended the pulpit and delivered the khutbah before the prayer. I said to him, "By Allah, you have changed the Prophet's tradition." He replied, "O Abu Sa'id, gone is that which you know." I said, "By Allah, what I know is better than what I do not know." Marwan said, "People do not sit to listen to our khutbah after the prayer, so I delivered the khutbah before the prayer." Volume 2, Book 15, number 77. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. Allah's apostle used to offer the prayer of Eid-ul-Adha and Eid-ul-Fitr, and then deliver the khutbah after the prayer. Volume 2, Book 15, number 78, narrated by Ibn Jurayj. Atta said, Jabir bin Abdullah said, "The Prophet went out on the day of Eid-ul-Fitr and offered the prayer before delivering the khutbah." Atta told me that during the early days of Ibn az-Zubair, Ibn Abbas had sent a message to him telling him that the adhan for the Eid prayer was never pronounced in the lifetime of Allah's apostle, and the khutbah used to be delivered after the prayer. Atta told me that Ibn Abbas and Jabir bin Abdullah had said, Volume 2, Book 15, number 79, narrated by Ibn Abbas, "I offered the Eid prayer with Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman, and all of them offered the prayer before delivering the khutbah." Volume 2, Book 15, number 80, narrated by Ibn Umar. Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr and Umar, used to offer the 2 Eid prayers before delivering the khutbah. Volume 2, Book 15, number 81, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet offered a 2-rakat prayer on the day of Eid-ul-Fitr, and he did not pray before or after it. Then he went towards women along with Bilal and ordered them to pay alms, and so they started giving their earrings and necklaces in charity. Volume 2, Book 15, number 82, narrated by Al-Bara bin Azib. The Prophet, p.b.u.h, said, "The first thing that we should do on this day of ours is to pray and then return to slaughter the sacrifice. So anyone who does so, he acted according to our sunnah, tradition, and whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, it was just meat which he presented to his family and would not be considered as nusuk." A person from the Ansar named Abu Burda bin Niyar said, "O Allah's apostle, I slaughtered the nusuk before the prayer, but I have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep." The Prophet, I said, "Sacrifice it in lieu of the first, but it will be not sufficient as a sacrifice for anybody else after you." Volume 2, Book 15, number 83, narrated by Sa'id bin Jubair. I was with Ibn Umar when a spearhead pierced the sole of his foot, and his foot stuck to the paddle of the saddle, and I got down and pulled his foot out, and that happened in Mina. Al-Hajjaj got the news and came to inquire about his health and said, "Alas, if we could only know the man who wounded you." Ibn Umar said, "You are the one who wounded me." Al-Hajjaj said, "How is that?" Ibn Umar said, "You have allowed the arms to be carried on a day on which nobody used to carry them, and you allowed arms to be carried in the haram, even though it was not allowed before." Volume 2, Book 15, number 84, narrated by Sa'id bin Amr bin Sa'id bin al-As. Al-Hajjaj went to Ibn Umar while I was present there. Al-Hajjaj asked Ibn Umar, "How are you?" Ibn Umar replied, "I am all right." Al-Hajjaj asked, "Who wounded you?" Ibn Umar replied, "The person who allowed arms to be carried on the day on which it was forbidden to carry them." He meant Al-Hajjaj. Volume 2, Book 15, number 85, narrated by Al-Bara. The Prophet delivered the khutbah on the day of Eid-ul-Adha, and said, the first thing we should do on this day of ours is to pray, and then return and slaughter our sacrifices. So anyone who does so, he acted according to our sunnah, and whoever slaughtered before the prayer, then it was just meat that he offered to his family, and would not be considered as a sacrifice in any way. My uncle Abu Burda bin Niyar got up and said, "O Allah's apostle, I slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, but I have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep." The Prophet said, "Slaughter it in lieu of the first, and such a goat will not be considered as a sacrifice for anybody else after you." Volume 2, Book 15, number 86, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, "No good deeds done on other days are superior to those done on these, first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah." Then some companions of the Prophet said, "Not even jihad?" He replied, "Not even jihad, except that of a man who does it by putting himself and his property in danger for Allah's sake, and does not return with any of those things." Volume 2, Book 15, number 87, narrated by Muhammad bin Abi Bakr al-Thaqafi. While we were going from Mina to Arafat, I asked Anas bin Malik about talbiyah. "How did you used to say talbiyah in the company of the Prophet?" Anas said, "People used to say talbiyah and their saying was not objected to, and they used to say takbir and that was not objected to either." Volume 2, Book 15, number 88, narrated by Atiyah. We used to be ordered to come out on the day of Eid, and even bring out the virgin girls from their houses, and menstruating women, so that they might stand behind the men and say takbir along with them, and invoke Allah along with them, and hope for the blessings of that day, and for purification from sins. Volume 2, Book 15, number 89, narrated by Ibn Umar. On the day of Eid-ul-Fitr and Eid-ul-Adha, a spear used to be planted in front of the Prophet as a sutra for the prayer, and then he would pray. Volume 2, Book 15, number 90, narrated by Ibn Umar. The Prophet used to proceed to the musalla, and an anaza used to be carried before him and planted in the musalla in front of him, and he would pray facing it as a sutra. Volume 2, Book 15, number 91, narrated by Muhammad Atiyah said, "Our Prophet ordered us to come out on Eid day with the mature girls and the virgins staying in seclusion." Hafsa narrated the above-mentioned hadith and added, "The mature girls or virgins staying in seclusion, but the menstruating women had to keep away from the musalla." Volume 2, Book 15, number 92, narrated by Ibn Abbas. "I, in my boyhood, went out with the Prophet on the day of Eid-ul-Fitr or Eid-ul-Adha. The Prophet prayed and then delivered the khutbah and then went towards the women, preached and advised them and ordered them to give alms." Volume 2, Book 15, number 93, narrated by Al-Bara. The Prophet went towards al-Baqi, the graveyard at Medina, on the day of Eid-ul-Adha, and offered a 2-rakat prayer of Eid-ul-Adha, and then faced us and said, "On this day of ours, our first act of worship is the offering of prayer, and then we will return and slaughter the sacrifice, and whoever does this concords with our sunnah, and whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before that, that is before the prayer, then that was a thing which he prepared earlier for his family, and it would not be considered as a nusuk, sacrifice." A man stood up and said, "O Allah's apostle, I slaughtered the animal before the prayer, but I have a young she-goat which is better than an older sheep." The Prophet, p.b.u.h, said to him, "Slaughter it, but a similar sacrifice will not be sufficient for anybody else after you." Volume 2, Book 15, number 94, narrated by Abdur Rahman bin Abbas ibn Abbas, was asked whether he had joined the Prophet in the Eid prayer. He said yes, and I could not have joined him had I not been young. The Prophet came out, till he reached the mark which was near the house of Kathir bin As-Salt, offered the prayer, delivered the khutbah, and then went towards the women. Bilal was accompanying him. He preached to them and advised them and ordered them to give alms. I saw the women putting their ornaments with their outstretched hands into Bilal's garment. Then the Prophet, along with Bilal, returned home. Volume 2, Book 15, number 95, narrated by Ibn Jurayj. Ada told me that he had heard Jabir bin Abdullah saying, "The Prophet stood up to offer the prayer of the Eid-ul-Fitr. He first offered the prayer and then delivered the khutbah. After finishing it, he got down from the pulpit and went towards the women and advised them while he was leaning on Bilal's hand. Bilal was spreading out his garment where the women were putting their alms. I asked Ada whether it was the zakat of Eid-ul-Fitr. He said no, it was just alms given at that time. Some lady put her finger ring and the others would do the same. I said to Ada, "Do you think that it is incumbent upon the Imam to give advice to the women on Eid day?" He said, "No doubt it is incumbent upon the Imams to do so, and why should they not do so?" Al-Hassan bin Muslim told me that Ibn Abbas had said, I joined the Prophet, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman in the Eid-ul-Fitr prayers. They used to offer the prayer before the khutbah, and then they used to deliver the khutbah afterwards. Once the Prophet I came out for the Eid prayer, as if I were just observing him waving to the people to sit down. He, then accompanied by Bilal, came crossing the rows till he reached the women. He recited the following verse, O Prophet, when the believing women come to you to take the oath of fealty to you, to the end of the verse, 60.12. After finishing the recitation he said, O ladies, are you fulfilling your covenant? None except one woman said yes. Hassan did not know who was that woman. The Prophet said, Then give alms. Bilal spread his garment and said, Keep on giving alms. Let my father and mother sacrifice their lives for you, ladies. So the ladies kept on putting their fatks, big rings, and other kinds of rings in Bilal's garment. Abdur Razak said, Fatks is a big ring which used to be worn in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. Volume 2, Book 15, number 96. Narrated by Ayub Hafsa bint Sirin said, On Eid we used to forbid our girls to go out for Eid prayer. A lady came and stayed at the palace of Bani Khalaf and I went to her. She said, The husband of my sister took part in 12 holy battles along with the Prophet, and my sister was with her husband in 6 of them. My sister said that they used to nurse the sick and treat the wounded. Once she asked, O Allah's apostle, if a woman has no veil, is there any harm if she does not come out on Eid day? The Prophet said, Her companion should let her share her veil with her, and the women should participate in the good deeds and in the religious gatherings of the believers. Hafsa added, When Atiyah came, I went to her and asked her, Did you hear anything about so-and-so? Atiyah said, Yes, let my father be sacrificed for the Prophet, p.b.u.h. And whenever she mentioned the name of the Prophet, she always used to say, Let my father be sacrificed for him. He said, Virgin mature girls staying often screened, or said, Mature girls and virgins staying often screened, Ayub is not sure as which was right, and menstruating women should come out on the Eid day. But the menstruating women should keep away from the musalla, and all the women should participate in the good deeds and in the religious gatherings of the believers. Hafsa said, On that I said to Atiyah, also those who are menstruating? Atiyah replied, Yes, do they not present themselves at Arafat and elsewhere? Volume 2, Book 15, number 97, narrated by Atiyah. We were ordered to go out for Eid, and also to take along with us the menstruating women, mature girls, and virgins staying in seclusion. Ibn Aun said, or mature virgins staying in seclusion. The menstruating women could present themselves at the religious gathering and invocation of Muslims, but should keep away from their musalla. Volume 2, Book 15, number 98, narrated by Ibn Umar the Prophet, p.b.u.h, used to gnar or slaughter sacrifices at the musalla on Eid-ul-Adha. Volume 2, Book 15, number 99, narrated by Al-Bara bin Azib on the day of Nar Allah's apostle delivered the khutbah after the Eid prayer and said, Anyone who prayed like us and slaughtered the sacrifice like we did then, he acted according to our nusuk tradition of sacrificing, and whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, then that was just mutton. That is not sacrifice. Abu Burda bin Nayar stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, by Allah, I slaughtered my sacrifice before I offered the Eid prayer and thought that today was the day of eating and drinking, non-alcoholic drinks, and so I made haste in slaughtering and ate and also fed my family and neighbors. Allah's apostle said, That was just mutton, not a sacrifice. Then Abu Burda said, I have a young she-goat and no doubt it is better than 2 sheep. Will that be sufficient as a sacrifice for me? The Prophet replied, Yes, but it will not be sufficient for anyone else as a sacrifice after you. Volume 2, Book 15, number 100, narrated by Anas bin Malik Allah's apostle. Tilda offered the prayer on the day of Nar and then delivered the khutbah and ordered that whoever had slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer should repeat it, that is, should slaughter another sacrifice. Then a person from the Ansar stood up and said, O Allah's apostle, because of my neighbors, he described them as being very needy or poor, I slaughtered before the prayer. I have a young she-goat which in my opinion is better than 2 sheep. The Prophet gave him the permission for slaughtering it as a sacrifice. Volume 2, Book 15, number 101, narrated by Jundab. On the day of Nar, the Prophet offered the prayer and delivered the khutbah and then slaughtered the sacrifice and said, Anybody who slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer should slaughter another animal in lieu of it, and the one who has not yet slaughtered should slaughter the sacrifice mentioning Allah's name on it. Volume 2, Book 15, number 102, narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah. On the day of Eid, the Prophet used to return, after offering the Eid prayer, through a way different from that by which he went. Volume 2, Book 15, number 103, narrated by Urwa on the authority of Aisha, on the days of Mina, 11th, 12th and 13th of Dhul-Hijjah. Abu Bakr came to her while two young girls were beating the tambourine and the Prophet was lying covered with his clothes. Abu Bakr scolded them and the Prophet uncovered his face and said to Abu Bakr, "Leave them, for these days are the days of Eid and the days of Mina." Aisha further said, "Once the Prophet was screening me and I was watching the display of black slaves in the mosque and Umar scolded them. The Prophet said, 'Leave them, O Bani Arfida, carry on, you are safe, protected.'" Volume 2, Book 15, number 104, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet went out and offered a 2-rakat prayer on the day of Eid-ul-Fitr and did not offer any other prayer before or after it, and at that time Bilal was accompanying him. No. Volume 2, Book 25, number 579, narrated by Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle, enjoined the payment of 1 sa of dates or 1 sa of barley as zakat-ul-fitr on every Muslim slave or free, male or female, young or old, and he ordered that it be paid before the people went out to offer the Eid prayer. 1 sa = 3 kilograms approx. Volume 2, Book 25, number 580, narrated by Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle, made it incumbent on all the slave or free Muslims, male or female, to pay 1 sa of dates or barley as zakatul fitr. Volume 2, Book 25, number 581, narrated by Abu Sa'id, we used to give 1 sa of barley as sadaqatul fitr per head. Volume 2, Book 25, number 582, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. We used to give 1 sa of meal or 1 sa of barley or 1 sa of dates or 1 sa of cottage cheese or 1 sa of raisins, dried grapes, as zakatul fitr. Volume 2, Book 25, number 583, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, the Prophet ordered Muslims to give 1 sa of dates or 1 sa of barley as zakatul fitr. The people rewarded 2 muds of wheat as equal to that. Volume 2, Book 25, number 584, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. In the lifetime of the Prophet, we used to give 1 sa of food or 1 sa of dates or 1 sa of barley or 1 sa of raisins, dried grapes, as sadaqat-ul-fitr. And when Muawiyah became the caliph and the wheat was available in abundance, he said, "I think observe that 1 mud of wheat equals 2 muds of any of the above-mentioned things." Volume 2, Book 25, number 585, narrated by Ibn Umar. The Prophet ordered the people to pay zakat-ul-fitr before going to the Eid prayer. Volume 2, Book 25, number 586, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. In the lifetime of Allah's apostle, we used to give 1 sa of food, edible things, as sadaqat-ul-fitr to the poor. Our food used to be either of barley, raisins, dried grapes, cottage cheese, or dates. Volume 2, Book 25, number 587, narrated by Nafi ibn Umar said, the Prophet made incumbent on every male or female, free man or slave, the payment of 1 sa of dates or barley, as sadaqat-ul-fitr, or said Sadaqa Ramadan. The people then substituted half sa of wheat for that. Ibn Umar used to give dates, as sadaqat-ul-fitr. Once there was scarcity of dates in Medina, and Ibn Umar gave barley. And Ibn Umar used to give sadaqat-ul-fitr for every young and old person. He even used to give on behalf of my children. Ibn Umar used to give sadaqat-ul-fitr to those who had been officially appointed for its collection. People used to give sadaqat-ul-fitr, even, a day or two before the Eid. Volume 2, Book 25, number 588, narrated by Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle, has made sadaqat-ul-fitr obligatory, and it was, either 1 sa of barley or 1 sa of dates, and its payment was obligatory, on young and old people, and on free men as well as on slaves. Eid around the world. Muslims all over the world celebrate Eid. Different cultures have different Eid traditions, but the message of Eid is the same everywhere. Eid is a time for joy, gratitude, and sharing. It's a time to remember Allah's blessings and be kind to others. The spirit of Eid. The spirit of Eid is about love, compassion, and unity. It's a time to come together as a community. We celebrate our faith and our blessings. Eid reminds us to be grateful for what we have. It teaches us to be kind and helpful to others. Let's spread the spirit of Eid throughout the year.